Greetings and welcome to this video, Sex the Evolution Killer. Buckle up for a fast-moving, exciting ride where we will carefully examine a key statement of Charles Darwin, the father of evolution. Please note, this is a scientific, not a religious video. It is about evidence and logic, not faith and belief. The evidence will be presented in a clear and understandable manner. You will be the jury who decides guilty or not guilty, true or false. Does sex kill? Macroevolution. Let's dive in. Evolution is the prevailing assumption in the news, in the movies, in the schools.
Given enough time, humanity will go extinct, because the counterpoint will be humanity will live forever, and I think that's just unlikely. So whether there will be some other form of consciousness that evolves after humanity, I hope so, but we don't know for sure.
How do you know they're all female? Does somebody go out in the park and pull up the dinosaur skirts?
We control their chromosomes. It's really not that difficult. All vertebrate embryos are inherently female anyway. They just require an extra hormone given at the right developmental stage to make them male. We simply deny them that.
Deny them that?
John, the kind of control you're attempting is, it's not possible. Listen, if there's one thing the history of evolution has taught us, it's that life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but, well, there it is.
And then came COVID-19. If you didn't like that the government shut down your business, you were branded an outlaw. If you didn't think mask mandates worked, you were called a murderer. And if you thought the Wuhan virus might have come from a lab in Wuhan that made viruses, the government called you crazy. They even censored you. The virus had to have come from a wet market.
The sequences in bats as they evolve and the mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human.
We are the most complex creature on this planet. A big-brained, two-legged mammal. We've risen from the raw materials of the earth to dominate and shape it. Wind the clock backwards, and the story of how we got to be us is a puzzle that defies all logic. Through nearly 4 billion years of evolutionary twists and turns, disasters strike. Predators threaten to wipe us out. From rodent to reptile, we face extinction at every turn. From the land into the water, fighting to survive every step of the way. From fish to worm, back to the very first spark of life. To a single, simple cell. This is the most extraordinary, improbable story ever told. The story of mankind rising.
Yes, evolution is everywhere, but is it solid science? Or is it a stupid scam? Have you ever scrutinized the evidence or questioned the assumption? John Sanford, Cornell University professor and primary inventor of the gene gun, said, "I had been trained in evolution, and everything I had ever thought was in terms of evolution. For me, it was as clear as the world around us. It was just uncontestable. But in retrospect, I had not critically assessed much of what I believed. I believed it based on very little, without critical assessment." I had friends who basically said, "Have you looked at the other side?" And I said, "What other side?" I honestly had been at Cornell at that point 20 years, and I really did not know there was a legitimate position that would contest evolutionary assumptions. Are you, like John Sanford, accepting as evolution as an assumption? What if there was clear evidence that it is impossible? Would you abandon it? It is important to understand how the evolutionary idea has become the prevailing assumption. It is propagated by a variety of techniques, but the biggest one you probably never heard of, equivocation. Equivocation is a way of speaking that is intentionally not clear and is confusing to other people, especially to hide the truth. Here is one example. Bill Nye the Science Guy has been a very influential communicator over the years, and he has a very interesting video which you will find where he tells a porky.
Living things change over time. Little changes and big changes. Whoa. Evolution.
Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Pay attention, porky incoming.
It started on Earth. Where did evolution begin? Well, near as we can figure, the ancient Earth was covered with the ocean a little over 3 billion years ago. And the ocean was a sort of primordial soup that living things got started in. Now, primordial, that's an old word that means very old. See, scientists have done a famous experiment with primordial soup where we cook it. The experiment would look something like this. Put primordial soup in a big flask, cover it with what we believe to be the ancient Earth's atmosphere, which would be ammonia. And ammonia is the same stuff you smell when you clean a window. We cook it by heat from the sun, and this would be freshwater rain, which would come out of this boiling flask right here, and lightning from primordial thunderstorms. The thunderstorms make the molecules change and rearrange themselves. And eventually, we have found that we can reproduce tiny pieces of deoxyribonucleic acid. Reproduce tiny pieces of deoxyribonucleic acid.
We can reproduce tiny pieces of deoxyribonucleic acid. That's what he said. Now, is that true? Absolutely not true. He is referring to the Miller-Urey experiment, and the Miller-Urey experiment resulted in the production of some amino acids. Now, amino acids are nowhere near pieces of deoxyribonucleic acid. He's telling an absolute porky, a falsehood, which has been listened to and influenced millions of students and people throughout the years. Here's Bill Gates referring to the DNA molecule as a very advanced, the most advanced software ever created. Malcolm Muggeridge, famous British journalist and author, said, "I myself am convinced that the theory of evolution, especially to the extent to which it has been applied, will be one of the great jokes in the history books of the future. Posterity will marvel that so flimsy and dubious hypothesis could be accepted with the credulity that it has." Let me explain why evolution is not only dumb, it is also dangerous. Consider a hypothetical teacher concluding the evolution unit. They are typically not this blunt, but she could honestly say, in summary, macroevolution says that your original ancestor was a primitive cell, probably a bacterium. You are the result of a mindless, purposeless, unguided process and millions of copying mistakes which were collected together by natural selection. I paid a qualified psychologist to analyze the emotional and psychological impact of this statement. She concluded emphatically that it is very, very negative. How would you feel if your child was a student in this class? Thanks for watching this far, but you ain't seen nothing yet. We have just set the stage for the murder of the ages, the killing of macroevolution. Please see part 2 of the continuation of this exciting journey, where the evidence will be presented in a clear and understandable manner. See you in part 2.